The secret cryptograph. The patent was originally filed in 1936 by an inventor who created a mechanical system for scrambling written communications. The device used rotating wheels and substitution codes to transform readable text into encrypted messages that could only be decoded using the same machine set to the proper configuration. This type of encryption was already well established by the 1930s, used by telegraph operators and military communications for decades without any security restrictions. But government reviewers decided that this particular cryptograph design posed a threat to national security and placed it under a secrecy order that would last longer than most human lifetimes. The inventor was prohibited from manufacturing, selling, or even discussing his creation. The patent application disappeared into classified files where it remained hidden from public view for more than 6 decades. During those 64 years, encryption technology advanced exponentially. Computer-based cryptography was developed, sophisticated digital encoding systems were created, and electronic communication security became a fundamental part of modern technology. The simple mechanical cryptograph that had been deemed too dangerous to release became laughably obsolete compared to encryption methods that were freely available to anyone with a computer. Finally, in the year 2000, the Patent Office quietly released the long-classified patent. After more than 6 decades of secrecy, the public was allowed to see the invention that had been considered such a threat to national security. What they found was a basic manual encoding device that any hobbyist could have built with materials available at a hardware store. The technology was not just outdated, it was practically useless compared to encryption methods that had been publicly available for years. This case perfectly illustrates the absurdity and paranoia that can drive government secrecy decisions. A simple communication device remained classified for 64 years, not because it represented any genuine threat, but because bureaucrats found it easier to maintain secrecy than to carefully evaluate whether the restrictions still made sense. The inventor died decades before his creation was finally released, having been prohibited from benefiting from or even discussing his own work. The Liberator. In May 2013, a small Texas nonprofit called Defense Distributed published a set of digital blueprints that changed the world overnight. The files contained detailed CAD models for a simple, single-shot handgun that could be produced almost entirely with a home 3D printer. They called it the Liberator, a name echoing a crude pistol dropped behind enemy lines during World War II. This new Liberator wasn't metal, but plastic, printed layer by layer on a consumer-grade machine. With a few dollars worth of materials and a single metal nail for a firing pin, anyone with the files could produce a working firearm. Within days, over 100,000 copies of the blueprint had been downloaded from servers worldwide. That's when the U.S. government stepped in. The State Department invoked the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, ITAR, arguing that by posting the files online, Defense Distributed had effectively exported weapons technology without authorization. They ordered the group to remove the files immediately, treating a set of digital blueprints like contraband. What followed was a years-long legal and philosophical battle that went far beyond gun control. It was about whether information itself could be banned. Cody Wilson, the project's creator, argued that digital code was a form of speech protected by the First Amendment. The government countered that untraceable, undetectable guns posed a national security risk. For the first time, the right to free expression collided with the reality of downloadable weapons. The courts wavered. In 2018, the State Department briefly settled the case, appearing to concede that the files could be legally published. But the backlash was immediate. Multiple state attorneys general sued to block the release, and a federal judge reinstated the restrictions within days. In the meantime, the Liberator files had already spread across the internet, mirrored on servers worldwide, impossible to erase completely. Today, 3D printed guns remain in a gray area, technically legal to manufacture for personal use in the U.S., but tightly restricted under laws requiring detectable metal components and serial numbers. Fully plastic weapons, invisible to metal detectors, remain banned under the Undetectable Firearms Act. Yet despite the bans, the Liberator lives on as a digital ghost, its blueprints circulating endlessly through peer-to-peer networks. The Liberator was more than a gun. It was a warning shot. It showed that once an invention becomes data, no authority can truly control it. Governments can ban the object, but not the idea. And in that way, the world's first 3D printed firearm may have succeeded beyond its creator's wildest ambitions, not by changing warfare, but by redefining what it means to invent in the age of information. Real quick, if you're learning something new from this video, be sure to like and drop a comment with your favorite. It helps us to spread this info to those who need to hear it most. Also, subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss what we reveal next. Trust me, there's a whole lot more hidden. Now back to it. DDT pesticide. DDT, or dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, represents one of the most dramatic rises and falls of any chemical technology ever developed. Initially hailed as a miracle pesticide that could eliminate insect-borne diseases and revolutionize agriculture, DDT ultimately became the first major chemical to be banned specifically for environmental reasons. DDT was developed as the first modern synthetic insecticide during the 1940s, earning its Swiss inventor Paul Hermann Müller a Nobel Prize for creating what appeared to be the perfect pest control solution. The chemical was remarkably effective against mosquitoes, flies, lice, and agricultural pests, while appearing to be relatively safe for humans and large animals. During World War II, DDT proved invaluable for controlling typhus among military personnel and civilians, potentially saving millions of lives by eliminating disease-carrying insects. After the war ended, DDT use exploded across American agriculture and civilian applications. The chemical was inexpensive to produce, highly effective against a wide range of pests, and persistent enough to provide long-lasting protection with relatively few applications. Farmers embraced DDT as a revolutionary tool that could dramatically increase crop yields while reducing the labor and expense of pest control. From 1950 to 1970, American agriculture consumed enormous quantities of DDT, with peak usage reaching over 80 million pounds per year during the late 1950s. But by the 1960s, disturbing evidence began to emerge about DDT's environmental effects. The chemical's persistence, which had initially been viewed as an advantage, turned out to have devastating consequences for wildlife and ecosystems. DDT doesn't break down quickly in the environment, instead accumulating in soil, water, and the fatty tissues of animals throughout the food chain. As the chemical concentrated at higher levels of the food web, it began causing serious reproductive problems in birds, particularly those at the top of aquatic food chains. The most visible victims of DDT accumulation were America's most iconic birds of prey. Bald eagles, peregrine falcons, and other raptors began experiencing catastrophic population declines as DDT interfered with their ability to produce viable offspring. The chemical caused these birds to lay eggs with shells so thin they would crack under the weight of incubating parents. Entire generations of eagles and falcons failed to reproduce successfully, pushing these species toward extinction in many regions where they had thrived for millennia. Marine biologist Rachel Carson documented these effects in her groundbreaking 1962 book Silent Spring, which fundamentally changed how Americans thought about chemical pesticides and environmental protection. Carson meticulously traced how DDT entered the food chain through contaminated insects, accumulated in small birds and fish, and concentrated to lethal levels in predatory species. Her research revealed that the chemical industry had released a persistent toxin into the environment without understanding or acknowledging its long-term ecological consequences. Carson's work sparked fierce opposition from chemical manufacturers who had invested heavily in DDT production and marketing. Companies like Monsanto and other major pesticide producers launched aggressive campaigns to discredit her research and maintain public confidence in DDT safety. Industry representatives argued that DDT was essential for agricultural productivity and disease control, claiming that banning the chemical would lead to crop failures and increased malaria deaths worldwide. Despite industry resistance, mounting scientific evidence supported Carson's conclusions about DDT's environmental dangers. Research confirmed that the chemical was accumulating in human fatty tissues, potentially causing cancer and genetic damage. Studies documented widespread DDT contamination in water supplies, soil, and food products throughout the United States. Even more disturbing, scientists discovered that DDT levels were increasing in Arctic wildlife thousands of miles from any direct application, demonstrating that the chemical was spreading globally through atmospheric transport. The Environmental Protection Agency, newly created in 1970, faced enormous pressure from both environmental groups demanding immediate action and agricultural interests insisting that DDT remained essential for food production. After conducting extensive hearings that lasted 7 months and included testimony from scientists on both sides of the controversy, EPA Administrator William Ruckelshaus made the historic decision to ban DDT for most agricultural uses in the United States. The DDT ban took effect on December 31, 1972, marking the first time that a widely used chemical had been prohibited, primarily for environmental rather than immediate human health reasons. The decision established important precedents for how government agencies would evaluate chemical safety, requiring manufacturers to demonstrate that their products wouldn't cause unacceptable environmental damage before approval for widespread use. The results of the DDT ban were dramatic and visible within just a few years. Bald eagle populations, which had fallen to fewer than 500 breeding pairs in the lower 48 states by 1970, began recovering as DDT levels in their environment declined. Peregrine falcons, brown pelicans, and other affected species similarly started reproducing successfully again as the persistent pesticide gradually cleared from their ecosystems. Freons, CFC, chlorofluorocarbons, commonly known as CFCs, or by the brand name Freon, were synthetic chemicals that seemed perfectly designed for modern consumer convenience. These gases were non-toxic, non-flammable, and chemically stable under normal conditions, making them ideal for use in refrigeration systems, air conditioning units, and aerosol spray products. CFCs were invented by DuPont chemists in the 1930s, specifically to replace more dangerous refrigerants like ammonia and sulfur dioxide, which could cause poisoning or explosions if refrigeration systems leaked. The new synthetic chemicals appeared to solve all the safety problems associated with mechanical cooling while providing superior performance characteristics. CFCs didn't burn, didn't dissolve in water, and didn't react with other chemicals under normal circumstances, earning them a reputation as miracle substances for the modern age. By the mid-1970s, Americans were purchasing over 5 billion aerosol cans annually, most of them propelled by CFC gases that allowed liquid products to be dispensed as fine sprays or foams. The convenience of aerosol delivery systems revolutionized consumer products, making it possible to apply everything from paint and lubricants to personal care items with unprecedented ease and precision. But in 1974, 2 atmospheric chemists published research that would fundamentally change how the world viewed these seemingly harmless chemicals. Mario Molina and Sherwood Rowland discovered that CFCs, precisely because of their chemical stability, could persist in the atmosphere long enough to reach the stratosphere, where they would be broken down by ultraviolet radiation and release chlorine atoms that destroyed ozone molecules. Their calculations revealed that each chlorine atom released from a CFC molecule could destroy thousands of ozone molecules before being neutralized, creating a chain reaction that could deplete the stratospheric ozone layer that protects Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation. The implications were staggering. Continued CFC use at current levels could thin the ozone layer enough to dramatically increase ultraviolet exposure at ground level, leading to higher rates of skin cancer, cataracts, and damage to crops and marine ecosystems. The scientific community initially greeted these findings with skepticism, but additional research confirmed the basic chemistry behind ozone depletion theory. Laboratory studies demonstrated that chlorine atoms did indeed destroy ozone molecules in chain reactions, while atmospheric measurements began detecting CFC molecules in the stratosphere, exactly as the theory predicted. The response to the CFC threat was remarkably swift by the standards of environmental regulation. In 1978, just 4 years after the initial scientific papers were published, the United States banned the use of CFCs in most aerosol applications. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, Environmental Protection Agency, and Food and Drug Administration coordinated their efforts to prohibit the manufacture and sale of CFC-powered aerosol products, giving manufacturers less than a year to develop alternative propellant systems. The discovery of the Antarctic ozone hole in 1985 provided dramatic confirmation that ozone depletion was actually occurring and was more severe than scientists had initially predicted. Satellite measurements revealed that springtime ozone levels over Antarctica had declined by more than 40% compared to historical baselines, creating a zone of severely depleted ozone that exposed the southern hemisphere to increased ultraviolet radiation. This discovery galvanized international action and led to the Montreal Protocol in 1987, a global agreement to phase out ozone-depleting substances, including CFCs. The protocol established specific timelines for reducing and eventually eliminating CFC production and consumption worldwide, with developed countries taking the lead and developing nations following with longer phase-out schedules and financial assistance. The Montreal Protocol became one of the most successful international environmental agreements in history, with nearly universal participation and compliance. CFC production peaked in the late 1980s and declined rapidly as manufacturers developed alternative chemicals and technologies. By the late 1990s, CFC production had been eliminated in most developed countries, and global emissions had fallen dramatically from their peak levels. The environmental recovery following the CFC ban has been measurable and encouraging. Atmospheric concentrations of ozone-depleting substances peaked in the 1990s and have been declining steadily as existing chemicals break down and are not replaced. Scientists predict that the ozone layer will return to pre-1980 levels by the middle of this century, representing one of the most successful reversals of global environmental damage in human history. The water-powered car. In the late 1980s, an unassuming inventor from Ohio named Stanley Meyer claimed to have achieved what energy researchers had chased for decades, a car that could run entirely on water. His water fuel cell technology, Meyer said, could split ordinary tap water into hydrogen and oxygen using only a fraction of the energy that science claimed was required. Once the gases were released, they'd recombine in the engine's combustion chamber, producing nothing but harmless water vapor as exhaust. Meyer's prototype, a modified dune buggy, became a sensation. He appeared on television, gave interviews to local papers, and even demonstrated the vehicle to engineers and investors who watched in disbelief as the car sputtered to life. Meyer claimed it could travel from Los Angeles to New York on just 22 gallons of water. To a public weary of oil crises and environmental decline, it sounded like the miracle the world had been waiting for. But the breakthrough drew powerful skeptics. Scientists pointed out that Meyer's claims violated the most basic laws of thermodynamics, specifically the principle of energy conservation. Breaking water molecules apart requires as much energy as burning the resulting hydrogen can release. If Meyer's system truly produced net energy, it would overturn the very foundation of physics. The scrutiny intensified when two investors who had funded Meyer's research accused him of fraud. They took him to court demanding to see the underlying technology. During the 1996 trial, expert witnesses examined his so-called fuel cell and found no revolutionary science, just conventional electrolysis powered by external electricity. The court ruled against him, declaring that Meyer had committed gross and egregious fraud. He was ordered to repay the investors and barred from promoting the invention commercially. Then, in 1998, Meyer died suddenly after dining at a restaurant in Grove City, Ohio. His brother later told reporters that Stanley had run outside clutching his throat, claiming he'd been poisoned. The coroner ruled his death a cerebral aneurysm, but conspiracy theories took on a life of their own. Many came to believe that Meyer had been silenced to protect oil interests or military energy patents. Today, his water-powered car stands as one of the most enduring legends of suppressed invention. The truth, however, appears less like sabotage and more like self-deception. An inventor so convinced of his own genius that he mistook ordinary electrolysis for world-changing innovation. Yet the mystery endures, a story of scientific hubris, bureaucratic disbelief, and the timeless tension between possibility and proof. Nuclear-powered aircraft engines. During the Manhattan Project, American scientists developed numerous nuclear technologies beyond the famous atomic bombs that ended World War II. Many of these innovations involved peaceful applications of nuclear energy, but government officials classified virtually everything related to atomic research under blanket security orders that would persist for generations. One particularly striking example involves nuclear-powered aircraft engines that were developed during the 1950s as part of classified military programs. Engineers successfully created compact nuclear reactors that could power aircraft for extended periods without refueling, potentially revolutionizing both military and civilian aviation. These atomic engines demonstrated remarkable performance characteristics, providing virtually unlimited range and eliminating the weight penalties associated with carrying large quantities of conventional fuel. The technology worked by using controlled nuclear reactions to heat air that was then expelled through conventional jet nozzles, creating thrust without requiring chemical combustion or stored propellants. Test flights proved that nuclear-powered aircraft could achieve performance levels impossible with traditional engines, staying airborne for weeks or months while carrying heavy payloads across intercontinental distances. But government officials determined that nuclear aircraft engines posed unacceptable risks if the technology fell into enemy hands. The ability to build aircraft with virtually unlimited range could provide decisive military advantages to any nation that mastered the engineering principles involved. Defense agencies argued that keeping nuclear propulsion technology classified would prevent potential adversaries from developing their own atomic aircraft capabilities. The classification of nuclear aircraft engines extended far beyond military applications into civilian technologies that could have transformed commercial aviation. Nuclear-powered passenger aircraft could have eliminated fuel costs, extended flight ranges, and reduced the environmental impact of air travel by eliminating combustion emissions. The technology represented a potential revolution in transportation that was buried under security classifications. Even more frustrating for the scientists and engineers involved, much of the nuclear aircraft research remained classified long after the original security justifications had become obsolete. By the 1970s and 1980s, nuclear technology had spread globally, and the basic principles of atomic propulsion were well understood by physicists worldwide. Yet government agencies continued maintaining secrecy orders on research that no longer provided any meaningful security advantages. Tesla's death ray. Nikola Tesla, the brilliant and eccentric inventor who revolutionized electrical engineering, spent his final years promoting what he called his greatest creation, a particle beam weapon capable of destroying aircraft and killing armies at distances of hundreds of miles. Tesla announced his death ray invention during the 1930s, claiming that his device could project concentrated streams of microscopic particles with enough energy to bring down entire fleets of enemy aircraft or eliminate ground forces from vast distances. He described the weapon as fundamentally different from traditional death rays that other inventors had proposed, explaining that his system would transmit actual particles through the atmosphere, rather than electromagnetic radiation that would dissipate over long distances. According to Tesla's public statements, his particle beam weapon would focus tremendous amounts of energy into streams thinner than human hair, creating destructive effects far beyond anything achievable with conventional explosives or energy weapons. He claimed that the concentrated particle beams could penetrate any armor, disable any aircraft, and eliminate any military formation within a range of 200 miles from the weapon's position. Tesla promoted his death ray as the ultimate defensive weapon that would make warfare obsolete by creating impenetrable barriers around nations that possessed the technology. He argued that countries equipped with particle beam defenses would become completely immune to military attack, since any approaching enemy forces would be destroyed long before they could pose a threat. The inventor spent considerable effort trying to interest various governments in funding development of his particle beam system. He approached military officials in the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, promising that his weapon could provide absolute military superiority to whichever nation supported its development. Tesla claimed that he had worked out all the theoretical principles required for the weapon, but needed financial backing to build and test a full-scale prototype. Despite Tesla's reputation as one of the most innovative electrical engineers of his era, government officials remained skeptical about his death ray claims. Military experts who evaluated his proposals found them long on theoretical speculation, but short on practical details about how such a weapon could actually be constructed and operated. Tesla's insistence that he had never committed any part of his invention to paper made it impossible for engineers to evaluate the feasibility of his concepts. In 1939, the Soviet government provided Tesla with $25,000 to develop his particle beam weapon, representing the only official funding his death ray project ever received. But even with financial support, Tesla was unable to produce a working prototype or demonstrate any of the revolutionary capabilities he had promised. Tesla died in 1943 at the age of 86, having never successfully demonstrated his death ray to the world. Within hours of his death, federal agents seized all of Tesla's papers and personal effects from his hotel room, taking possession of everything the inventor had left behind. The government's immediate response to Tesla's death suggested that officials took his weapons claims seriously enough to ensure that any potentially dangerous information remained under government control. The FBI's investigation of Tesla's papers revealed the anticlimactic truth about his famous death ray. Government scientists who examined his research found that the weapon designs were primarily speculative and philosophical, rather than practical engineering blueprints. The particle beam concept showed no evidence of sound scientific principles or workable methods for achieving the extraordinary effects Tesla had claimed. Despite the disappointing reality of Tesla's death ray research, the government's handling of his papers fueled decades of speculation about hidden weapons programs and suppressed technologies. The mystery deepened when researchers discovered that not all of Tesla's papers had made it to their final destination. The FBI initially cataloged 80 trunks of Tesla's documents and effects, but only 60 arrived at the Tesla Museum in Belgrade nearly a decade later. The missing materials have never been accounted for, leading to persistent theories about government cover-ups and classified weapons programs based on Tesla's research. The Inventions Secrecy Act. Under the Inventions Secrecy Act of 1951, the United States Patent Office has the authority to classify any invention that might affect national security, preventing inventors from developing or even discussing their own creations until government agencies decide the technology can be safely released. This system operates largely in secret, with patent applications being reviewed by defense agencies and other government organizations that can impose secrecy orders without public oversight or appeal processes. Inventors whose work gets classified face legal restrictions that can last for decades, during which time they're prohibited from manufacturing, selling, licensing, or publicly discussing their inventions under penalty of criminal prosecution. The scope of this patent suppression system is far broader than most Americans realize. As of 2018, nearly 6,000 patents remained under active secrecy orders, covering everything from advanced materials and energy systems to communication technologies and manufacturing processes. These classified inventions represent a hidden layer of technological development that exists parallel to the publicly available patent system. Government agencies impose secrecy orders not only on inventions that pose clear military threats, but also on technologies that might disrupt economic stability or challenge existing industrial structures. Patents can be classified if they might affect energy markets, threaten established industries, or provide economic advantages that government officials prefer to keep under American control. The process for evaluating patent applications under the Inventions Secrecy Act lacks transparency and accountability mechanisms that would prevent abuse or arbitrary decision-making. Patent examiners flag applications for security review based on broad criteria that can encompass almost any advanced technology, and the agencies that make classification decisions operate without meaningful oversight or public scrutiny. Once a secrecy order is imposed, inventors have very limited recourse for challenging the classification or obtaining compensation for their restricted patents. The government is only required to pay 75% of assessed damages, and inventors must prove their losses to agencies that have strong incentives to minimize compensation claims. Many inventors simply abandon their classified work rather than fight expensive legal battles against government agencies. The economic impact of patent suppression extends far beyond the individual inventors whose work gets classified. When breakthrough technologies remain hidden in government vaults, society loses the benefits of innovation that could solve energy problems, improve medical treatments, enhance communication systems, or create new industries that generate jobs and economic growth. The classified solar panels. In 1971, classified documents show that the Army, Air Force, and NASA all seriously considered placing solar panels under secrecy orders that would have prevented their commercial development. These agencies viewed solar photovoltaic generators as potentially valuable military technology that should be restricted from public access. Solar panel technology had been developed during the 1950s primarily for space applications where conventional power sources were impractical. Early photovoltaic cells were expensive and inefficient, but they offered the crucial advantage of generating electricity directly from sunlight without requiring fuel, moving parts, or complex maintenance. Military planners recognized that this technology could have significant advantages for remote installations, satellite systems, and battlefield equipment. The government agencies evaluating solar panels for restriction argued that photovoltaic technology could provide military advantages that should not be shared with potential enemies. They worried that widespread civilian use of solar panels would make the technology more accessible to foreign governments and reduce American strategic advantages in space-based and remote power generation systems. From their perspective, keeping solar technology classified would preserve military superiority while preventing adversaries from developing their own advanced photovoltaic capabilities. Fortunately, cooler heads ultimately prevailed. Government reviewers eventually recognized that solar panel technology had such obvious civilian applications that attempting to classify it would be both impractical and counterproductive. Solar energy represented a clean, renewable power source that could benefit American industry, reduce dependence on imported fuels, and provide energy solutions for remote civilian applications. The economic and environmental benefits of solar technology clearly outweighed any theoretical military advantages that might be preserved through secrecy. But the mere fact that solar panels were seriously considered for classification reveals the broad interpretation that government agencies took regarding national security restrictions. Military planners were prepared to suppress one of the most beneficial technologies of the 20th century simply because it might have some theoretical military applications. Had these restriction advocates succeeded, the development of solar energy infrastructure could have been delayed by decades, fundamentally altering the modern energy landscape and global efforts to address climate change. Lawn darts. Lawn darts, also known by the brand name Jarts, were oversized metal projectiles designed for backyard games that combined elements of horseshoes and target throwing. These heavy steel-tipped missiles became popular recreational equipment during the 1970s and early 1980s before their devastating safety record forced government intervention. Lawn darts consisted of large metal points attached to weighted bodies with plastic fins designed to stabilize flight. Players would toss these half-pound projectiles towards circular targets placed on the ground, scoring points based on accuracy and proximity to the target center. The game required enough space for the heavy darts to travel safely, but manufacturers marketed them as family-friendly backyard entertainment suitable for players of all ages. The fundamental problem with lawn darts was immediately obvious to anyone who understood basic physics and child behavior. These were essentially metal spears weighing half a pound each, with sharp 4-inch steel points designed to stick into the ground when thrown. The combination of substantial weight, aerodynamic design, and penetrating tips created projectiles that could cause severe injuries or death if they struck a person instead of landing in the target area. During the peak years of lawn dart popularity, emergency rooms across the country began seeing a steady stream of injuries caused by these seemingly innocent recreational products. Children were particularly vulnerable because they often failed to understand the safety precautions required for playing with heavy metal projectiles, and their smaller size made head and torso strikes more likely to cause serious injury. The Consumer Product Safety Commission documented over 6,000 lawn dart injuries between 1978 and 1988, with a disproportionate number involving children who suffered head trauma, eye injuries, and penetrating wounds from errant throws or careless handling. Many of these injuries required emergency surgery, and some resulted in permanent disability or disfigurement. The tipping point came in 1987, when 7-year-old Michelle Snow was killed by a lawn dart that sailed over a fence and struck her in the head while she played in her family's backyard. The dart penetrated her skull and caused fatal brain injuries, demonstrating that these products posed unacceptable risks even when used according to manufacturer instructions in appropriate settings. Michelle's father, David Snow, launched a determined campaign to ban lawn darts after his daughter's death, arguing that no recreational product should pose such severe risks to children and families. He testified before Congress, met with Consumer Product Safety Commission officials, and generated media attention about the dangers of lawn darts until government agencies could no longer ignore the mounting evidence of serious safety problems. In December 1988, the Consumer Product Safety Commission voted unanimously to ban the sale of lawn darts in the United States, making it illegal to manufacture, import, or sell these products anywhere in the country. The ban took effect immediately and included provisions for recalls of existing inventory to remove dangerous products from retail stores and consumer homes. The lawn dart ban represented a clear case where government intervention protected public safety by eliminating products that posed unacceptable risks despite their popularity and legitimate recreational uses. These 10 banned inventions represent more than isolated cases of government overreach or corporate protection. They reveal a systematic pattern of control that shapes which technologies reach the public and which remain forever locked away. What these stories ultimately reveal is that the world we inhabit isn't the world we could have built. It's the world that certain interests decided we're allowed to have. The next time you wonder why progress seems slower than it should be, remember that the most revolutionary technologies might already exist, waiting in government files for bureaucrats to decide we're ready for the future. If you learned something from this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Don't keep these discoveries as a secret to yourself. Until next time, when we find out how.